Hey, my name is Teresa Matsura, and you're listening to Uncanny Japan. We're on episode 99, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to do another local folktale? This one is also listed as one of the nanafushigi of this area. Remember those 7 mysterious occurrences? Episode 35 if you're new. I'm also fairly confident this is so local that it hasn't been talked about anywhere else. At least not in English anyway. So shall we? It's called The Cat's Grave, Nekozuka. But the cat wasn't the only fatality in this legend. Very much a part of the story is the rat's grave, Nezumizuka. Today's episode is especially special because when I went to take photos of the graves and check out the area, I got lost. Both the cat and the rat graves are tucked away on the top of this hill in this idyllic little neighborhood. The roads are narrow, windy, and there are no street signs or house numbers, as anyone who has lived or visited in Japan knows well. So I was very lost. After a kind old lady farmer directed me to the cat grave, and I finished my investigations there, I was trying to find the rat one, and I couldn't. Several minutes of wandering and I bumped into an old man farmer, pushing his wheelbarrow to his corner plot, and I asked him if he could help me. Not only did he show me by drawing a map in the dirt, but he was very excited to tell me parts of the old folktale that had been passed down for generations, things his grandfather had told him, but are not found in any online guide or book. So I will tell you those sweet little details too, as well as his rendition of the story. I'm really excited to tell this tale as he told it to me because that means it won't be lost in time. Would you like to explore the stranger, more obscure corners of Japanese culture? Dig a little deeper into superstitions, curious customs, and all those mysterious creatures that inhabit the land? If so, then this is the podcast for you. Uncanny Japan is where I, author Teresa Matsura, share all the fascinating tidbits I unearth while doing research for my writing. From the bizarre to the ghastly, and everything in between. I hope you enjoy the show. Before I start today's show, I want to teach you a word. If you don't already know it, that is. It shows up a lot in Japanese folktales, manga, and anime. It's ongaishi. It means something like repayment of a favor, or paying someone back after some act of kindness. You might have heard it in the Japanese fairy tale, Tsuru no Ongaishi, clumsily called on Wikipedia, Crane's returning of a favor. But I get it. Sometimes these phrases sound so perfect in one language, then you try to translate them into another, and they just don't fit. Anyway, I guess you could call this story Neko no Ongaishi, but that's not what it's called. It's called Nekozuka, the cat's grave, or the cat's mound. It goes something like this. Mukashi, mukashi, long ago, in the coastal town of Omaezaki, there stood a temple called Henjo-in. Every day the head abbot would stroll along the ocean side and watch the boats coming in or leaving the harbor. He was a nice guy and he liked to make sure everything was going smoothly and everyone was safe. Well, one day, during a bout of rough weather, he noticed a wooden plank out bobbing in the high waves. The monk did a double take. There, drenched and gripping tight to that tossed-about board, was a kitten. Oh no. Not too far from the near-drowning kitten was a small fishing boat. The abbot cried out to the fisherman, "Taihen da, taihen da! There's a piece of wood with a small kitten hanging on for dear life. Save it!" The fishermen, also being nice, made their way over, scooped up the tiny animal, and delivered it to the head monk. He then took the creature home, and together with the rest of the monks in the temple, they nursed it back to health. Let's call the cat Mike, which literally means 3 hairs, but think of it more as meaning 3 colors, or a 3-colored cat, a calico. This little kitten was indeed a calico cat, because in the story it's referred to as Mike quite often, and it very well could have been its name. With all the love and attention, wee little Mike grew up to be a very clever and cool cat. It got along with everyone, but had a special bond with the head abbot, and was said to understand everything he said. Mike's other special friend was a white cat living nearby. Its name was Shiro, meaning white. Mike and Shiro liked to hang out together doing their feline duties, napping on warm stones in the sun, chasing after bugs and birds, or otherwise enjoying the salty, fish-scented breeze blowing off the ocean. It was nice. For 10 years, that is. On one particularly fine spring day, a traveling monk showed up at the temple looking for a place to stay for the night. Of course, no problem at all. You can stay for as long as you'd like. The modest temple didn't usually get visitors, so the head abbot and all the monks were happy to have a guest, even though he was a little bit weird. On day 3 of the traveling monk's stay, Shiro padded over to the temple and asked Mike would he like to go visit Issei together. But Mike said, "No, I'm not sure why, but I'm concerned about the head abbot." Later that night, there was an incredible racket in the ceiling of the main hall. It lasted all night long. Even the people living nearby heard it. Come the next morning, everything grew very quiet again, and they finally went to investigate. Up there in the attic, they found the bloodied, half-dead bodies of Mike and Shiro, but also next to them, as big as a dog but wearing a traveling monk's robes, was a giant rat, also bloodied and dead. Some stories say that the rat was barely clinging to life, but the version the old farmer told me said that he was dead, so I'm going to go with that. As it turns out, the traveling monk was a Nezumi, a big old rat that had changed into human form and was planning to kill and eat the head monk of the temple. But Mike figured it out, and with the help of his friend Shiro, they battled the Nezumi and killed it, getting seriously injured in the fight. Despite careful care, the 2 cats soon succumbed to their injuries and passed away. The entire town was devastated, especially the head monk who had saved the kitten so many years ago. The 2 cats were given a lovely funeral service and were buried next to the temple. A pine tree was planted on the grave in remembrance of the cat's bravery and Mike's ongaishi. The pine tree was called Sabao no Matsu, the mackerel pine tree, because it grew and it split like the tail of a mackerel. I don't know, I would have attributed the splitting of the tree to the spirit of each cat, or likened it to 2 cattails, but someone decided to go with mackerel. I guess it doesn't really matter because at the beginning of the Meiji period, in the late 1800s, a strong typhoon blew it down, and sadly it's gone now. However, on December 6, 1932, a cat grave marker was erected and it still stands there now, although the cat's missing an ear. To this day, people still leave little cans of cat food for the spirits of Mike and Shiro. And while not there when I visited, I've seen photos of the cat statue with collars on or bandanas around its neck. I'll put the photos I took up on the website. So what happened to that nasty rat? Well, they decided to haul the dead carcass to the shore and throw it into the sea. So several of the monks grabbed his legs and began to carry him to the ocean. Here again, there are different versions of what happened. One says that the rat was still alive and spoke to them, while another has them dropping the rat and then it appearing to the head abbot in his dreams that night. But the story the farmer told me, and the one I'm going to stick with because it's first-hand information, was that the monks were carrying the dead Bake Nezumi, and the closer they got to the ocean, the heavier it got. It got so heavy that they couldn't lift it anymore. They dropped the creature, and then they heard a voice saying something like, "Please don't throw me into the ocean. I'm sorry. If you give me a proper burial, my spirit will keep the seas calm and make sure that all the fishermen who leave port here will come back with a lot of fish." They thought this was a fair deal and made a little grave for the rat right there where they dropped it. Today, somewhat similar to the cat grave, is the rat one. Only the rat marker is a whole lot newer. It even has a park nearby that's named after it and a stunning view of the ocean. It said that, indeed, the seas calmed and many fish were caught after that. I'd like to point out the typhoon that knocked over the Sabao no Matsu pine tree, though. Or maybe that was just the rat spirit getting its last bit of revenge. Okay, that's not in the story. I made that up. Just forget that. But what the farmer told me about this is that because of that exchange, rats are now known as kind of good luck charms for fishermen. I found an online reference to a Japanese book called Kanto Minaton, written by Kyokute Tadataka, published by Tamenaga Shunsui in 1841. There, in Chapter 7, is mention of a story called Neko no Chugi, or the cat's loyalty, and it's very similar to this story. There's an engraving with that story that looks incredibly similar to the story that I'm telling you now. I'll put that up on the website as well. There are some differences, though. One was that when they found the animals in the attic, one cat was dead while the other was breathing its last breaths and died before it could get any help. The rat was still clinging to life, however, but was quickly beaten with a stick. The cats were buried on the temple grounds, and the rat, after some thought, was also buried there. Because even though he was a monster, we must still have compassion, which I must admit is a very interesting and much more Buddhist way of looking at the situation. What I learned from the farmer, aside from the story above, is that the original temple is no longer there. It's just a crop of trees now. It was torn down and kind of merged with the nearby temple. There is also a shrine in the area. It has a very cool legend that he also told me about. There's a full moon, a bridge across the sea, a god, and a dead horse. I'll do some more research on that one, and I'll tell that here someday. Okay, back to the cat and rat. Another thing that the farmer was very excited to tell me was that the calico cat, the Mike, was a male cat. For my cat lovers out there, you know that most all calicos are female, so the fact that this one was male means that it was quite rare. He said even today everyone in town loves calico cats, and if they see a stray, they get all excited and they think, "Oh, what good luck." I was just listening to the recording I made on my way to the rat grave immediately after talking to him. I recorded it all so I wouldn't forget the details. And indeed, while I'm telling Richard the story, I mentioned that I saw a calico cat trot across the street just a few minutes earlier. So good luck. I think I'll end there. But one more thing. Speaking of cats, the last bit of extra content I did on Patreon, I think I told you about it last time, was about cat folk belief and old wives' tales. Did you know that a little cat spit will cure a millipede bite? Or that if your cat gets lost, there's a poem you can write down, attached to the front gate, and your beloved pet will come home. Also, if you line up in a row with two of your friends and you pee, a bake neko will appear. It's true. Okay, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening. Everyone stay safe and take care, and I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. You've reached the end of the show, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate you listening and supporting us. Any subscribing, reviewing, and gushing to your friends, family, even random strangers really does help keep us going. If you have the means and you want to help a little more and get a little more, we are making extra content over on Patreon, all for only $5 a month. Or if you like to read horror, you might be interested in my Bram Stoker-nominated short story collection, The Carp-Faced Boy and Other Tales. 本当にありがとうございます. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you real soon.